What is good, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only NIO stock and what you should be looking after for the future. I'm also going to do some in-depth technical analysis on NIO and give you guys my price prediction for tomorrow based off what the charts are showing and based off what the data is suggesting. I'm also going to talk about what's going on with the overall market from a macroeconomic standpoint, talk about how this may affect NIO as well. I'm also going to break down what NIO put on their Twitter page, which is very good news for the long-term future, and why I'm still very, very bullish for the long-term of this company. Now, before I break anything down, before I get into any more details, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner, so don't take any of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, but benefits the entire NIO community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $2,000. And the best part is any of these 12 free stocks could be a free NIO share, a free Tesla share, or a mix of all of them. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends in just 1 week. Check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. NIO was up about 4.64% for the day. We actually have a pretty decent looking candle for the weekly charts. However, I'm still very cautious when it comes to the price action of NIO, and I'm sure you guys can see exactly why I feel this way, because the markets are still seeing lots of red. They're still being affected by what Powell said, and the sentiment in the market is really changing. Now, for the short term, it's important to note that the fear and greed index is slowly getting closer to the fearful side. We were actually greedy yesterday. Now we're slowly moving to this direction because Powell did mention the possibility of the Fed having to be more hawkish and raise rates in a more aggressive way. He also did not signal signs of a pivot just yet, which in turn is leading to more panic in the markets. Now, one thing I want to note about NIO is the fact that we have earnings in 1 week from today. So that tends to be a good sign for NIO, and NIO does tend to push up approaching this date. The date was just confirmed. So it's going to be at 5:30 a.m. Eastern time. So very early in the morning for many American investors out there. It's going to be before the market opens for many of them. Now, on top of that, the NASDAQ also confirms the same date for earnings. When it comes to data for NIO, let's just look at this real quick. The short interest has been on a bit of a downtrend. This is a good sign for NIO, which is a sign that many of these shorts have been covering, and there is potential for this thing to push up approaching earnings now. On top of that, if you look at the day-to-week seasonality forecast, NIO tends to be green 53% of the time on Fridays. So that's a good sign for NIO. On top of that, NIO does actually tend to be performing pretty decently in November's, at least historically. So I'm hoping for some more better price action for this month. And many analysts are still very bullish, of course. When it comes to the price pairs ratio right here, this is like super low, which means NIO was not performing. It was not outperforming the market in any way. It was actually getting destroyed in the past over the last few weeks. So this is often a sign that NIO has been like getting hit very hard. It's oversold. So it could actually start to see some relief, and we could actually see this start to push up a bit. Why do I say that? Because there are moments where this comes down very hard. We get a bit of a spike. It comes down pretty hard. It spikes up. It comes down a bit. It spiked. It came down very hard, and it is set to spike up a little bit. This would mean that NIO could be outperforming the market sooner than anticipated, especially because we have earnings coming up very soon. Perhaps NIO does push up a bit and does do a little bit better than the overall market. Now, that doesn't mean that NIO is not set for like more downside, more sideways action, because the overall market does affect it. You guys can see this comparison between NIO and the SPY. But if you compare it to like the QQQ, for example, or the NASDAQ, you will notice that once this loads, they tend to be very similar as well. So be very careful about that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean NIO is just not going to run ever again. It definitely will. But for the short term, I am anticipating some improvements that are actually being made to its price action. That's also because from a data standpoint, yesterday the price pairs ratio ended up, not the price pairs, the short volume percentage, I don't know what I'm saying. The short volume percentage actually ended up going down, which means that the sellers, the people that are going short on NIO, are losing control over the stock, and those going long are slowly gaining some more control. The last thing to really look at would be the volume. Let me just reload this so it's up to date. The volume is just very close to average. It's not that great, but we did have a pretty decent green day with this average volume, so that's a good sign for me. Now, the last thing to really look at is what NIO put on their Twitter page. We can see right here, NIO Power is a mobile internet-based power solution with extensive networks for battery charging and battery swap facilities, offering a power service system with rechargeable, swappable, and upgradable batteries to provide users with power services for all scenarios. So it's a very, very good sign, in my opinion, showing the fact that they're with these power services, working with them, and actually improving the lives of their customers. I think in turn it brings very good customer service, and it really helps the business. So, anyways, when it comes to NIO, what am I essentially anticipating? Well, from a technical standpoint, there's a different interpretation of this. If you look at NIO, it's been on this like big downtrend right over here for the past like year and a half or so. It's been almost like 2 years actually. And what's interesting is we had many touches of the lower trend line in this channel, and we had one more touch around this $8 range, so you could draw it like that. We are starting to like bounce off this because we have a long wick right here. There's a long wick and we're starting to bounce a bit. So there is potential now because of the fact that if I close this, let me close this line. I don't know what's going on here. Close that. Let's adjust this for, it's going to be for the 8th. So on, not the 8th, the 10th of November, NIO is actually having their earnings like right here. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see this thing slowly start to pump again and again approaching the date, especially when implied volatility picks up. That's what tends to happen during these big earnings reports. So I am a little bit more, I would say, like bullish than bearish for the next couple of trading days. However, I don't think NIO is going to just fly like crazy hard. Just like these moments right here when you guys saw NIO just see like 5-6 green days in a row and go from like 16 to 22. I'm not seeing that really, a move like that. I'm seeing a slow push up approaching the date because the overall market is just not necessarily helping us. The overall market is still looking more bearish. I do think we're going to have a slight push up tomorrow into open, followed by a big sell off on Friday by the time we close. And I do think it's going to affect NIO. So for the short term, I'm still anticipating that NIO is going to hold up a lot better than many people anticipate. If you look at the way the chart is looking, this does look like in a very big accumulation schematic. It's kind of messy, at least on a very shorter time frame. But right here we have what appears to be a spring. This is like the test, and I'm hoping for a nice push into the $10 range and a retest of like 10.4 into tomorrow, followed by kind of like a sell-off as the day goes on. I want to see NIO hold $10 for tomorrow. Now, I want to talk about something else. On SPY, we have a problem. Even though SPY has been like, I got a big push down followed by a nice push up after that. What I'm starting to think is this thing has this gap right here, right? This big gap around 374.8. I wouldn't be surprised if this thing kind of opens up like this and we slowly push up and we get a big gap fill and we don't necessarily hold very well, though we might get a big rejection and then see a big sell-off after that. And this thing might come down even lower and retest like the 370s, maybe go as low as like 368 again. I wouldn't be surprised if SPY did something like this tomorrow. And because I'm seeing this happening throughout the markets, it's going to affect Tesla. Apple's going to show us a very similar trend. I don't think Apple's going to fill this gap all the way up to like 144, but I could see Apple retest 140 and then come down after that. Very, very possible. And finally, let's just talk about the QQQ before I get on with NIO. Where's the QQQ? On the QQQ, there's something I don't like about it right here. So yes, we have like a very similar gap like to the upside, but if you go back on the chart on a bigger time frame, where is it? I think there's another gap down here. Oh, we actually filled the gap down here. So that's actually a good sign. We actually did this in one day. So yes, we ended up filling the gap down here. Could we fill this gap up here? I'm very, very concerned that that might not be the case. And there's a good chance this thing's going to start selling off even more. And we may see this thing in the 250s very soon. But this is a sign that many tech stocks are going to show more signs of weakness. But for NIO, I do think this is going to hold it back a bit, but I still believe this thing has some potential to push up and outperform the market. And that's because earnings is approaching. And after today, I mean, this thing held up pretty well. So for tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a very similar set of price action. NIO might do something like this. I wouldn't be surprised if NIO pushes to about 10.4, like I mentioned, all the way up here. and then we get a big rejection and we start to kind of sell off as the day goes on. But I still believe NIO is going to slowly try to climb and climb and climb and start respecting an uptrend from this point on. So right here, the $10 mark, I want to see this thing break past 10 and hold 10.4. And if we're really bullish, it could keep going, but I'm anticipating it to kind of slow down as the day goes on and as the market sells off. And I think NIO is going to hold and then retest like the $10 mark for quite a bit of time and kind of hold this range throughout the rest of the day and kind of close like that. Now, here's something that's good about NIO though. Even though I'm anticipating a move like that, if you look at the trend, NIO was oversold when it came down here to this $8 range, right? On the daily. This is the daily right here. So on the daily, NIO was oversold. Very, very oversold when it touched that $8 mark. RSI was only like at 16. What happened after that? Now, this is something that I was talking about in my previous videos. You will notice that NIO came down. We push up. We started to come down. We came down because of like the FOMC meeting, but then we immediately like sprung up. My point is, as you guys can see, this thing is starting to respect a bit of an uptrend. Is it a strong uptrend? No, but it is still an uptrend because we're starting to make higher highs and higher lows compared to this $8 mark when we hit it. So I wouldn't be surprised if over the next couple of days, the next couple of trading days, we slowly make our way to the 10s, the 11s, and maybe fill this gap up here in that like $12 range. So I could see NIO push up more from here, especially going into earnings. We might see some very nice price action. Now, I don't think, like I mentioned to you guys, I don't see NIO just like skyrocketing to like $20 instantly. And I feel this way because, the overall market still affects it. We could see this in the data right here. The market does affect how NIO moves. This means that because there's weakness in a lot of the tech sector for lots of like blue chip stocks in the QQQ, it's going to slow NIO down a bit. So it's not going to run up as hard as it could have, but it's still doesn't change the fact that I'm still a little bit more bullish than bearish nonetheless for the short term. This doesn't mean every day is going to be green. There are going to be some red days in there as well. But overall, I still think we're going to see more green than red, and this thing should start to push up more slowly. All right, especially going into earnings. So anyways, guys, I gave you guys my prediction for tomorrow. I'm anticipating a nice push into open, followed by a slow sell-off as the day goes on because it's a Friday. That tends to happen. But remember, historically, NIO does tend to be green on Fridays, at least for the year, like 52% of the time. So I'm hoping that we actually hold the $10 range and close a little bit in the green. Now, if the market does end up coming down, like really hard, for example, because Fridays could be brutal for the market as a whole, right? That's different for NIO. What could happen is we have support in these particular zones. So I want to actually talk about where support is. All right. So if NIO comes down, the first major support is going to be around this leg. I actually highlighted this in a previous video. 9.9 has some support, but it's like stronger around this 9.8 zone. All right. We have stronger support right there. And if we break below that, the next major level of support would be 9.64, followed by 9.28. So these are all support zones to really watch for in case we do hypothetically come down. But once again, I'm still anticipating more upside for NIO, so I'm hoping for a nice push up and a move kind of like this for tomorrow. With that said, thank you for listening. Have a great day, guys. Remain calm, cool, and collected, and I'll see you guys in the next one. NIO to the moon because the long-term future is still very bright with the expansions, the improvements to their business model, and the improvements to their technology and innovation. Still very bullish for the long term. For the short term, there could be some kind of like sideways action, so be ready, guys. Thank you, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.